Welcome to Level Up, the podcast for men over 30 who want to level up their lives. This show is about self-help, wellness, and motivation, without hype, without fluff, and without pretending change is easy. Many of us know we're capable of more, but just need a little push to get us back on track towards reaching our full potential. The aim of this podcast is to connect like-minded individuals to each other and create a virtual community that draws on the collective effort of the group. It's about thinking clearly, designing your life deliberately, and taking action that actually sticks. So here's how this works. My name is Ryan, and I am the host of this podcast. In each episode, I engage with an AI-powered persona designed to challenge thinking, bring perspective, and help unpack complex problems. This persona brings in the latest thinking and research to help you develop a better internal psychology, improved balance, and stronger self-awareness. The takeaways are designed to be practical and action-oriented, while maintaining a big-picture view that's geared towards growth. My aim is to draw on the perspectives of the personas as a means to uncovering core issues and help you thrive. They're lenses, and I'm here to help connect them. We will cover topics ranging from self-actualization to relationships and kids, business, wealth creation, communication tips, what it means to be masculine in today's world, and everything in between, all with the aim of helping you become a better you. Think of it less like an interview and more like a conversation that helps you see things more clearly. So let's start with a question a lot of men carry quietly. Why do I feel stuck, even when my life looks fine on paper? Most men who feel stuck aren't failing. They're showing up. They're handling responsibility. They're doing what's expected of them. But internally, something feels off. You're busy, but not progressing. Tired, but not fulfilled. Capable, but underused. And underneath all of that is a quiet thought. Is this it? Today's AI-powered expert is Mike. So Mike, what's actually going on here?
Most men aren't stuck in the way they think they are. They're not lacking ability, and in most cases, they're not even lacking effort. What they're experiencing is a combination of misalignment and overload. They're trying to maintain systems that were built for a previous version of their life, while also adding new demands on top of those same systems. So the structure becomes strained. And when the structure is strained, everything inside it starts to feel heavier than it should.
So they're pushing, but inside, something that doesn't really fit anymore?
Exactly. The effort is there. These aren't men who are avoiding responsibility or not trying. They're showing up. They're putting in time. They're doing the work, at least on the surface. But the issue isn't the presence of effort. It's how that effort is being applied. Because for effort to create progress, it has to move in a clear, aligned direction. And when it doesn't, when the structure underneath is off, that effort starts working against itself. That's where friction comes in. You start to feel resistance in places that should normally feel straightforward. Tasks take longer than they should. Decisions feel heavier than they should. It's not that nothing is happening. It's that progress isn't happening cleanly. So instead of a sense of forward movement, you get this constant drag. And over time, that drag builds. What should feel like momentum starts to feel like effort without reward. And that's where the interpretation shifts. Because from the inside, it doesn't feel like my system is misaligned. It feels like something's wrong. I should be further along. And that's when it gets labeled as being stuck. But it's not a lack of movement. It's inefficient movement, effort that isn't translating into meaningful progress. And until that alignment is corrected, that friction remains, no matter how hard you push.
That's interesting, because most advice goes in the opposite direction. Work harder, be more disciplined, apply more pressure. And to be fair, that does work sometimes, but it doesn't seem to last. Why is that?
Because pressure amplifies whatever system you're already operating in. Think of pressure as something that doesn't fix. It reveals and intensifies. It takes whatever structure you're currently working within and pushes it harder. So if that structure is solid, if your routines are clear, your priorities are focused, and your execution is consistent, then pressure can actually work in your favor. It sharpens your output. It accelerates your results. It helps you move faster in the right direction. But if the system underneath is misaligned, then pressure does something very different. It doesn't correct the issue. It magnifies it. So instead of progress, you start noticing more friction. Things feel harder than they should. You're putting in more effort but seeing less return. There's a constant sense of pushing without gaining traction, and over time that builds into fatigue. Not just physical fatigue, but mental fatigue as well, because you're constantly applying effort without experiencing the kind of feedback that tells you it's working. That's where the analogy comes in. It's like trying to drive faster when your wheels aren't aligned. You can press the accelerator as much as you want. The engine responds, the car moves, but it doesn't move cleanly. There's resistance in the steering. The movement feels unstable. You're constantly correcting your direction. So even though you're technically moving forward, it takes more energy than it should to get there. And the longer that continues, the more draining it becomes. Eventually, you start to feel exhausted. But it's not because you can't handle effort. It's because the structure you're relying on isn't supporting that effort efficiently. You're forcing output from a system that isn't built to carry it. And that's the key point. The problem isn't your capacity to work harder. It's that working harder inside the wrong structure will always lead to diminishing returns. Until the alignment is fixed, more pressure just means more strain, not more progress.
And that's where burnout starts to show up.
Exactly. Burnout isn't just about doing too much. It's about doing too much in a way that isn't sustainable. Because there are people who work long hours, carry a lot of responsibility, and still maintain energy and momentum. So the issue isn't simply volume. It's how that volume is structured and supported.
Okay, so we've got misalignment at a system level. But there's also something happening internally. Because a lot of men don't just feel stuck, they feel disconnected. What's going on there?
That disconnection is critical because what looks like lack of motivation is often something else entirely. It can be fatigue, it can be unprocessed stress, it can be a loss of clarity around what actually matters. But instead of identifying those signals, most men are conditioned to push through them, which works in the short term, but over time, it creates a different problem. You stop listening, you stop adjusting, and eventually you lose the ability to distinguish between resistance and direction. That's where the sense of being stuck deepens.
So if we bring this together, you've got a system that no longer fits, internal signals that aren't being interpreted properly, and execution that's spread too thin to work. That combination creates the feeling of being stuck.
Exactly. And once you see that clearly, the solution becomes more precise. Not easy, but precise. You don't need to completely reinvent yourself. You need to realign your system, tighten your focus, and start responding to the right signals. That's where things begin to move again.
So if we take everything we've discussed, the misalignment at a system level, the breakdown in execution, and the disconnect from internal signals, it explains why things feel stuck. But let's move this forward a bit. Because understanding the problem is one thing, what people really want to know is, what does it actually look like when this is working? Not in theory, but practically, day to day. If someone realigns their system, tightens their execution, and starts paying attention to the right signals, what changes? What does that look like in real terms?
It becomes simpler before it becomes more effective. That's usually the first noticeable shift, because most of the friction we've been talking about comes from complexity without clarity. Too many inputs, too many priorities, too much being carried at once. So when things start to align properly, the system doesn't feel bigger, it feels smaller and more focused. At a structural level, the biggest change is clarity of direction. Instead of trying to make progress across multiple competing areas, there's a clearer decision around, this is what matters right now. And just as important, this is what doesn't. That alone removes a significant amount of friction. Because a large part of what drains people isn't effort, it's decision fatigue and divided attention. From an execution standpoint, things become more predictable. Not because everything is easy, but because the system no longer relies on constant decision-making. You're not waking up and figuring things out from scratch every day. You already know what needs to be done, when it gets done, and what standard it gets done to. So execution becomes less emotional and more automatic. There's less negotiation, which means consistency increases, even on days where energy or motivation is low. And internally, something shifts as well. You start paying attention to signals earlier, not when things have already broken down, but while they're still manageable. You notice when your energy is dropping, when your focus is slipping, when something feels misaligned. And instead of ignoring that, you adjust. Small corrections made consistently. Over time, those three layers start reinforcing each other. Clear structure reduces overwhelm. Consistent execution builds momentum. Awareness keeps the system sustainable. And what people usually experience from the outside is this. Things feel lighter, not because there's less responsibility, but because there's less internal resistance. Effort starts converting into progress more reliably, and that creates a different kind of feedback. Instead of, I'm working hard but nothing's happening, it becomes, what I'm doing is actually moving things forward. That's where momentum comes from. Not from intensity, but from aligned, repeatable action that compounds over time. And once that's in place, the feeling of being stuck starts to disappear. Not because everything is perfect, but because movement is finally clear and consistent again.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. Let's land this plane. Why men feel stuck, how misalignment shows up, what breaks down internally, and how execution gets diluted. But before we wrap this up, I want to make this practical. Because insight is useful, but only if it translates into action. So let me ask you this directly. If someone is listening to this right now, and they recognize themselves in what we've described, the friction, the lack of clarity, the inconsistent progress, how do they take what we've discussed and actually apply it? Can you break this down simply? What matters most, what they should focus on first, and what the next step should look like in real terms?
The simplest way to think about this is, most people don't need more information. They need better alignment between what they know and what they actually do. So if I had to break this down into what matters most, it comes down to three things. First, clarity of focus. You need to decide what actually matters right now. Not everything in your life at once. Not 10 areas at the same time. Just 1 or 2 areas where progress would make the biggest difference. Because without that clarity, your effort gets spread too thin. And when effort is diluted, results slow down. Second, simplify your system. Most people try to improve by adding more habits, more goals, more expectations. But progress usually comes from the opposite. Removing what isn't necessary, reducing friction, making it easier to execute consistently. So instead of asking, what should I add? Ask, what can I remove that's getting in the way? Third, commit to consistent execution. Not based on motivation, not based on how you feel that day, but based on a simple standard. If it's part of the system, it gets done, even if it's not perfect, even if it's small. Because consistency builds something more important than short-term results. It builds evidence. Evidence that you can follow through. Evidence that your actions move things forward. And that's what eventually creates momentum. So in practical terms, the next step is very simple. Pick one area, strip it down to the essentials, and define one action you can repeat daily for the next 7 days. Something specific, something realistic, something you won't need to negotiate with yourself about. And then you execute it. Not aggressively, not perfectly, just consistently. Because what you're trying to build isn't intensity. You're building alignment and trust in your own execution. And once that starts to form, everything else becomes easier to layer on top of it. That's where progress begins. Not from doing more, but from doing what matters, consistently, within a system that actually supports it.
That's really the core of what this show is about. Not becoming someone else, but becoming deliberate about the person you're already becoming. Because whether you're paying attention or not, your habits are shaping you. Your routines are shaping you. Your decisions are shaping you. The question is, are you directing that process or just reacting to it? So we'll leave you with this. Take 20 minutes, uninterrupted, and answer 3 questions. 1. Where in my life do I feel most stagnant right now? 2. Is that a system issue, an execution issue, or an awareness issue? 3. What is one small action I will commit to for the next 7 days? Not 10 changes, 1. And execute it daily, calmly, deliberately, without overthinking it. If this resonated, subscribe to Level Up. In the next episode, we'll break down how to build real confidence without faking it. Until then, respect your time, protect your energy, and keep leveling up.